You're in the water loop.
Waterloop is made possible in part by grants from Spring Point Partners and the Walton Family Foundation.
Waterloop.
Hey, this is Travis with Waterloop. I want to tell you a story about High Sierra Showerheads, who I'm proud to have as a sponsor of this podcast, particularly because they make incredibly water-efficient showerheads. I've talked with owner David Malcolm about growing up in California, learning about the importance of water and energy efficiency from his father. David has been designing high-efficiency nozzles for agriculture and golf courses for the past 30 years. The golf course people actually came to him wanting a nozzle that produced a uniform spray but was water efficient. So David went in and designed a nozzle that explodes a low pressure stream of water into a shower of large, powerful droplets. David actually thought this would make a great showerhead, and that's how High Sierra Showerheads was born. And nobody has their nozzle technology. It's patented, and you get a great shower while saving water. Use promo code LOOP20 for 20% off at highsierrashowerheads.com.
You're in the water loop.
Welcome to Waterloop. This is Travis here for the 100th episode of the podcast somehow. And as this was coming up, I was like, who should I have on? And I decided I really just wanted to talk about water from a spiritual perspective, a mental perspective, emotional perspective, and surfing in the ocean. And so I've got the two best people I know to talk about those topics. Have Wallace J Nichols, author of Blue Mind, and so much other work. Jay, thanks for coming on.
Oh, my pleasure. So it's good to hang out with you guys.
Yeah, and Jaimal Yogis, author of Saltwater Buddha, Mop Rides the Waves of Life, several other books too. All Our Waves Are Water. It goes on and on. Jaimal, thanks for joining as well.
Oh, happy to be here. Thanks, Travis. Hey, Jay.
Yeah. And so I'm going to try to make this like the most casual episode of the podcast yet. And you guys have known each other for a long time, so we'll just go wherever it takes us. Yeah, it's been a crazy year, right? Everyone's been declaring that and saying that, and it looks like we're kind of coming out of it into a little bit of a new world now, which is good stuff. But there's been a couple things in the past year or so that have happened in your guys' lives I wanted to touch on and how they intersect with water. Jaimal, I know that you've relocated yourself. You're up in British Columbia. You're in the mountains, seeing lots of awesome photos and videos of you and your boys charging down the mountain, making snow like your new waves and your new water. It is water. What's that been like for you as a water guy, an ocean guy, being up in the mountains and having that new nature, that new water to explore?
Yeah, it's definitely been a fortunate place to pass this year. I mean, it's a playground for kids up here. We have the mountain, we have the lakes. We were skiing a lot through the winter, and now we're mountain biking and swimming. And but being an ocean person, totally honestly, I do feel like I'm drying up inside a little bit. I'll be totally honest. I miss, when we have gotten out to Tofino, and it's just, there's something different about the ocean. It's it really feels like the lifeblood for me, as much as I love lakes and rivers, and the mountains. There is just something really unique about getting into the ocean every day, the rhythm of the waves. And so we're not planning on staying here forever, but it's been a wonderful place to be, and a place that's dear to our hearts. And on a water level, it's been interesting. Like, I think I'm a novelty seeker. I know that about myself. I really seek new experiences. That's kind of why I've hopped to different writing paths and moved to lots of different places. I've lived all over the world. And so when we first got here, I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm getting into this new sport that I used to do as a kid. I'm skiing and snowboarding, and that novelty was sort of keeping me going. And the fact that there is so much beautiful water up here was really, I think, also, and we just felt lucky to be outside at all. But as I've been here longer, also absence makes the heart grow fonder. And I've been it's almost like missing an old friend, with the ocean. Like the sadness is sweet, sort of like that Rumi poem, Longing. You feel like, I'm glad I missed the ocean this much. I'm glad that connection that I've been has been there since I was a kid, and it does feel special. It feels like a family relationship or a romantic relationship almost, that you pine for it, and it's made me appreciate even more what I do have living close to the coast usually. So that's been sort of a hidden or an unexpected outcome of it, as I think just appreciation of how special saltwater is.
Yeah. It'd be almost more sad if you weren't missing the ocean, right? You'd be like, oh no, I've fallen out of love with it. That's even more tragic than not having it.
If it was that easy to replace, it would seem like, all those special moments were made cheaper or something, It's like, I ran away from this.
So you got out to that Tofino, which is this kind of the surf spot in British Columbia. What was it?
Yeah, Tofino's, sorry to interrupt.
No, yeah.
Tofino's amazing. Yeah. There's something really unique about the coastline up here, and it's not as cold as people think, and there's orcas around. So nothing to complain about there. We just happened to settle in Whistler for the year for some work reasons for my wife. And, so, it feels like such a privileged,
yeah, that's awesome though.
Be here, it's been really special. It's a special place, but yes. And the snow's great.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand. I spent 9 years I'd say stuck in Annapolis, Maryland, on the Chesapeake Bay, working in DC, and would drive a couple hours, 2.5 hours to get to the beach. And I was like, am I ever going to have that as my regular life again? And fortunately, I found my way to Wilmington, North Carolina, and just went out this morning, surfed for about an hour and a half, some nice waist high, just glassy waves, and water's in the low 70s. Beautiful, beautiful way to start the day and start the work day. Jay, I wanted to ask about kind of what happened in your life in the past year. I know that very, very unfortunately, you lost a special home, a special house to wildfires. And I wanted you to kind of share that story and maybe how water and being on the coast there has helped you, in your healing from that.
Yeah, that's right. I think, like you said, it's been a crazy and certainly different and challenging year for most people on Earth for a variety of reasons, including the pandemic and various other social issues and elections and things. Not to get political.
No, it's been a crazy year in a lot of ways. A lot of things have converged. That's for sure.
And so in the middle of that, I kind of asked myself, how, well, at least it can't get any worse. And then it did. We had this storm in California that was unlike any I've ever seen in my life. It was just this dry lightning storm, and it was just this weird, quick, windy, powerful storm with no rain and a ton of lightning, which would simply be beautiful if it hadn't started 600 wildfires around the middle of the state. And one of those fires was near our home, and our home was one of the first lost that next day. And I got out, I got the dog, my family was safe. I didn't grab much. I think I'm embarrassed by the things I grabbed. Used kind of a gallon of oat milk and a Bluetooth speaker, just to be specific. Seemed like a good idea at the time, but drove out, and I think our home was gone, within a couple hours. Major fire. I mean, I had thought about staying back and defending our place, and pretty glad I didn't do that. To give you an idea, the canyon that our house was in, we had a vintage Airstream, an old Airstream trailer, which is this big aluminum bubble, and it melted. And it takes 1,221 degrees to melt aluminum. So if I had been standing there with my hose, the water would be evaporating right, and as it came out of the hose, and I would obviously be a crispy critter at that point. And so anyway, that's basically the background there. Beautiful storm, big fire, a lot of people. I'm not the only one. Our family's not the only one to get hit this way. A lot of people around the state, around the West, lost property and belongings. But and I have to say, I thought of my dear friend Jaimal a bit during this time, because of some of the conversations that we've had, his practice, his writing, and the deep dives he's taken into interesting subjects, including fear. And it was just a kind of very strange experience of having many powerful emotions at the same time that normally you don't think are compatible, like complete, utter heartbreak and fascination and gratitude, all at the same time. I would say anger. Some people get angry in times like these. I don't. It's not one of my go-to emotions when I'm under stress. And I learned that about myself. In heavy stress, in like relentless heavy, you lose everything during a global pandemic and have no work, and everybody around you is feeling the same way. That's kind of heavy stress. I don't get angry, and I don't really get afraid. I think I move into a place of gratitude, and I really learned that about myself this year, and have done my best to kind of share that perspective outside of the wildfire themes. Everybody's gone through some sort of unforgettable trauma.
Well, that's amazing, because gratitude is not the place you would think that somebody would go, right, when you have a loss like that. So that's very interesting, and I think admirable. I mean, that's incredible. And what about?
I don't take any credit. For it. It's just what it's just what my brain does. And I think it might be a problem sometimes. Yeah. People might say, "Dude, why aren't you angry?" And I don't know. And why aren't you afraid? I don't know. I'm just thankful. So it may be just. It's not always a good thing, but that's how I feel. So I'm grateful to have lived in that home for 20 years and raised a couple of kids there. So
yeah. And then you've been spending time at the beach and walking along and looking at the ocean and all that good stuff. I know you're in a beautiful spot there in the Central Coast.
Yeah, first time back to check to see if our house made it. And finding that it hadn't, and all that was left was the fireplace. I just stripped down. I was pretty covered with ash, and it was a pretty messy situation, smoky. I just stripped down and got in the creek. I mean, it just instinctively was like, you know what I need? That thing right there, Mill Creek. I need to freeze my butt off in that creek for a while. And I sat in the creek and cried, and again felt gratitude. I'm made out of that creek water. I mean, literally, not making this up. That's the water that makes my makes my brain and my body and my family. And so I just got in the creek, thanked the creek for all that, and leaned on it one more time. And then, of course, going to the ocean, getting in the water. Waves have a way of soothing your soul when you need them to. Falling asleep to the sound of those waves. Fortunate to be able to do that. But it was a little bit like, okay, blue mind guy, let's see if your theory holds up under pressure. And I was like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
This whole water therapy thing might not be enough to get me through this. And, and obviously it's not the only way we take care of ourselves, but I think if people are listening to this podcast and have followed you along for 100 episodes, they love water too and have some perspective on, how to use water in our lives effectively, for our emotional health as well as our physical health.
Yeah. I love that point that whatever water body you live near is where your drinking water really comes from. I mean, I think that's kind of what you're getting at there, right? So you literally, you're right, you literally are made from that water body that is near you. For me, I'm get my drinking water from the Cape Fear River. So this is a whole nother way for me to view that body of water. That's really cool. I think
it's about as intimate as it gets when you think about it. And it doesn't get any more intimate than your relationship to your water, wherever you are, British Columbia, East Coast, West Coast. It doesn't get any more intimate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that I've seen a lot of articles during this time, during the pandemic, about people, turning to nature. It was amazing seeing just from my window of my house, all of a sudden last spring, people out on bikes and walking, and that just in gobs, right? Getting outside because that's all you had to do. And that's really where you were allowed to go. And certainly water was a huge part of that. People going to a beach if they could, or hiking to a lake, or walking by a stream. Love to just kind of get your guys' observations if what you've seen of articles like that, what you've seen firsthand, why you think people gravitated toward nature and blue spaces during this time.
Yeah, I've been, before we came up to Canada, I was psyched to see the city close Ocean Beach Great Highway, and took traffic. So then people were out there rollerblading and skating and biking right along the beach every day, and the beach was packed with people. It's usually not. Like, Ocean Beach is kind of like a little bit of it's a gorgeous beach, 3 miles on, but it's often foggy. It's often windy. The water's cold. It's rough. Graffiti on the walls. Sometimes there's you might run into some trash. You don't beyond the usual plastic that is you don't want your kids to pick up. But yeah, it was getting use, and that really filled my heart as much as, in the beginning we were all like, what do I do? Do I mask? Do I stay? It was, but people figured it out and figured out how to be outside. And that was a really joyful thing for me. I often Jay and I both, I think, are often harping on the fact that our true wealth is our health, and our health is only as healthy as the planet is. And really and that comes back to our waterways and our oceans. That's where, those are the engines of health on the planet. But I think you don't feel that viscerally if you haven't been able to get out in it. If you can't sit on the beach or float down a river, or float down a lake and look at the sky, or you're not pushed to do that by my family. We kind of grew up appreciating stuff like that, but not every family does. And I think this pandemic has pushed some folks who that's not their go-to for in their free time necessarily, has pushed folks outdoors, and that's been the same here on the mountain. There's like a huge uptick in backcountry skiing, and I think that this our kids, I know, are going to look back at this year as a year they were like outside more than any other year. And that's, again, a privileged experience of the pandemic, but I hope it's one that a lot of people are having, a lot of young people are having, because I think that's our hope for the future, is that people value nature as, like that literally is your bank account for for life, because if we don't have to value it, we have to experience its benefits, and
Yeah,
everybody should have access.
I hope, as I've seen all the people outside and discovering things maybe they didn't do, and actually buying a bike or getting a paddleboard, I'm like, I hope that a lot of these people continue this after the pandemic, and they have some long-term connection with nature that then, like you said, parlays into stewardship and better health and all that. So I hope people keep going with it. Jay, what's been your observations during this time with people? And, do you think it's just a function of what they're able to do, or do you think there was something else there with, how nature and water make us feel?
Yeah, I've had a lot more and different conversations about water in particular, but nature in general, during the pandemic and its role in our wellness and our healing and our grieving. And that's ranged from first responders and veterans and groups of journalists who are on the front line telling these harrowing stories daily, to health practitioners, so nurses, therapists, doctors, the whole range. And during a lot of Zoom calls with those groups, turns out, and I've seen that it's like the need to explain is shorter. There's a shorter runway from the base level up to, oh, I get it, because people are experiencing the lack thereof. And that's been really, it's sort of made our job easier, I guess you could say. But there's this thing I used to do back when we met in rooms together and did things like keynotes and readings. That seems like so long ago, but I think it'll happen again someday. But I used to say, so imagine a ballroom at some kind of conference, and there's 1,000 people sitting there, facing forward. And I would sometimes say something like, okay, I have asked my team to lock all the doors and remove all the water bottles from the room, and you will get your water back in 3 hours. And then I pause. And here's the trick. Like, I don't have a team that I travel with. There is no team. I'm not touching anybody's water bottle. The doors are still wide open. If they look under their chair, their water bottle's still there. But the mere suggestion that you won't have your water for 3 hours, then the next question I ask after a couple beats is, did you feel that? Did your mouth get a little dry or a lot dry at the mere suggestion that you have no water for 3 hours, even though your visual data collecting, which would be just look at the door, it's not closed, look under your chair, your water bottle's still there, suggests that I'm making up a story. Your mouth still got dry, and it happens so fast that it happens without thinking, because if you thought about it, you'd realize that nobody's taking your water. So it's this lightning fast response. And I think that, that little silly story relates to your question about like how, in Jaimal's comment on, the in the absence or the scarcity or the sense of, wow, maybe I can't have this, we understand it more quickly. And that's a function of the way our brain works. that emotional response can be, lightning fast, literally. And so that's what we've been seeing is people getting that that gut response that says, I need some nature, man. I need to jump. I feel bad. I need some water. I need to jump in the lake. I need to go walk by the ocean. But also our domestic waters, our tubs, our showers, and even float spas, which I know is a topic you have some recent expertise in.
Well, I was headed toward this podcast with you guys, and I was like, I have to do something cool that I can talk about, something Zen, something, with the Blue Mind. And so, and I've been meaning to do it for a long time. Jay, we talked about it in episode 1 about float tanks and I never had the experience. So I went to one by me yesterday. And that was really awesome. It was, I think it was what I expected in a really good way. It's an hour. And at first I was like, an hour, man, that's a long time. Am I going to get bored in there? And then, so I started kind of, I was like, I'm just going to meditate. I did the lights off, no sound, total sensory deprivation thing. And so I'm just kind of doing my little mantra in my head, and I nod off and I'm asleep floating in water, and then I kind of come back to, but in that weird zone where you're kind of sleeping, kind of awake. I'm only feeling my mind, not even the body as much. And so I loved it. It was awesome. And the guy's like, "Oh, you're going to come back?" I'm like, "Definitely." I gotta mess around with this a little bit more. So, have you guys done floating before, or what was your experience? And I know, Jay, you've mentioned there's a lot of science on that too. I'd love to just kind of chat about it a little.
Yeah, Jaimal, have you floated?
Yeah, no, I haven't done it. So you jump in there, because I know you've been to some float conferences and all kinds of stuff. So
Yeah.
I'm a floater to be, for sure.
Gotta try it though. Gotta try it.
Well,
yeah.
So there's, for those who are like, what the hell are you guys talking about?
Thank you.
Floating a float tank or a float spa is basically an oversized bathtub, very, very shallow, 18 inches of water or so, hypersaline, saturated with these Epsom salts, and so maybe 1,000 pounds of salt thrown in there. And the water's warm, matches your body temperature. The air is warm, matches the water temperature. And so you really lose track of the separation between your body, the water, and the air. There's done well. There's no sound, there's no vibration, and there's no light. And so there's no visual stimulation. There's no auditory stimulation. There's very little somatic stimulation. So your brain, which is almost always processing all of those things, whether you realize it or not, gets kind of a break. And when you get that break, you don't just go to sleep and turn off. You switch into a different mode that I refer to as Blue Mind. And floating is obviously not the only way you can feel this thing called Blue Mind. You could be floating in a canoe on a lake, and you can experience a version of this, or in a surfboard on an ocean, and or sitting in your own bathtub. So that's kind of the deal. And it turns out the research is really clear, and it's starting to pour in, pun intended. And a guy named Justin Feinstein at the Laureate Institute for Brain Research, he's one of the pioneers. The research goes way back, but he's a neuroscientist, and he's literally looking at the brain floating in your skull, which is in water, while you float in another sort of capsule. It's a sort of very meta, you could say. And the research is clear. It's one of the best activities you can do for anxiety, post-traumatic stress, depression, and a bunch of other things that are harming and hurting and getting in our way, especially this year. So these float spas are popping up all over the place. I recommend that people sign up for 3 floats to give it a real try. Some people have a real squirrely experience the first time. They can't settle in. Maybe they had a cup of coffee and they're just feeling like they're trapped, or they feel claustrophobic, or just give it 3 floats before you make heavy judgment about it. And I've done it a bunch, and every time I do it, it's a little different. Sometimes it feels like a power nap. Sometimes it feels like a week in Maui. I mean, literally, I've gotten out of a 90-minute float thinking, what in the hell just happened? I feel like, what year is it? Where am I? And am I really flying?
Yeah,
It's a bit of a trip, so.
Yeah, like you said, you lose the distinction, between your body and the water and the air. Like I really had that complete, just like my consciousness and kind of all the rest was gone. It was a lot of fun for sure. Gotta.
Yeah, at the very least, I'd say it's fun. It's a fun thing to do with your friends, with your family members, and then go out and have a cup of tea and talk about it. And maybe you'll never do it again, but at least you'll say, wow, that was weird. Because we modern humans never really get to experience nothing. Even when we're quiet, even when we're meditating, there's still, you're still touching whatever you're sitting on, or you possibly are going to have some sounds coming in. The water really is really a nice on-ramp for people who may have a hard time with mindfulness meditation, calming their mind. And then once you know your mind in that state, then it's easier to get there when you're not in a float tank. So that's kind of maybe the takeaway is when you know your blue mind and you know how cool it is, you want that feeling again. And you can achieve it without signing up for another float, of course. But if you don't ever know what that feels like, it may just sound far out, hippy dippy, scary, woo woo, whatever. But that's about where the handoff to Jaimal, his insights into that, getting to that place. That some people might say it's an unnecessary crutch to get to. Into a practice of meditating, but I think it's a great on-ramp that water serves that purpose for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, I started meditating when I was in there because I was like, okay, well, I guess this is what I'll do with my mind at this moment. But I felt like it was a way to get into the experience of floating, rather than the floating being a way to get into meditating, if that makes sense. Like I think I get more, only doing it once, but I think I get more out of sitting and meditating traditionally, whatever, and having that mental state. But then the float was just a cool way to totally disappear into that, that state. And then like probably the whole second half hour was just kind of in this, in between world, if you will. Yeah. It
reminds me of even though I haven't done a formal float, I having done like longer meditation retreats where you're doing, oftentimes on like the 7th or 8th day, you'll get to these places after all that sensory deprivation and stillness, where you feel like your body's kind of floating because your cells are relaxed. You don't have the barriers that usually are, and muscle tension that are blocking just a natural flow and blocking like an appreciation of being. I think a water being have relaxed at that point, and you're kind of embodied. And but I think it takes a lot. It takes a lot of meditating to get to that place, and not every, and I think a lot of people express frustration when they're getting into mindfulness meditation because they're busy. We're all busy, and it's hard to just take 10 minutes and say, okay, now I'm going to stop everything. It's like you just end up planning for work and doing, it's like saying I'm going to go surf in this storm right now and just for 10 minutes, and I'll catch a great wave. Well, you probably are not going to catch a great wave. It's going to take you years. So it does sound, Jay, like I know from a neuroscience level, it's like you create a groove or a habit of being in that blue mind state. It's like the more flow you have, the more you train yourself, and to have an entry point to that state, or even go do a float and then try 10 minutes of mindfulness meditation sounds like a cool way to do it. I'm also thinking about like the body awareness, because I think one thing that surfing and just being in the water does that I've noticed, like if you surf and then you go do a little mindfulness practice, is like we're usually so up here in our thoughts, we're not really our body is always present, right? So just feeling that awareness of the body and letting our sort of cells have their own consciousness takes waking them up. And I think the water naturally does that. I know I'm not using scientific terminology, whatever that is, the nervous system getting like its blue mind on. I think I imagine that floating, it's like you're getting the pressure from the water and your sensory system wakes up. I think that's an important part of learning to be present. So just riffing on what I don't really know about, but
it sounded pretty good to me.
Awesome.
I think Jamal, you need to get someone to like pay you to float and write about it. Just from a writerly perspective, an article and a real specific, like, do the 3 floats in 1 week thing and chronicle it. Maybe even somebody put a camera in your face afterwards, if that's not too invasive. But one of the things so when I speak at these float conferences, one of the topics is that you get out of that float experience and you're wide open to better understand the importance of water to our lives. And it's kind of like, Jamal, you said, when you get out of the ocean after a surf, or you get out of a kayak after a long paddle, or you get out of the pool after a swim, you're in a really nice place in your day, and you're wide open to perhaps accept some new ideas, some new useful concepts. And so that's one of the messages for all these float spas is like, don't hit people with your cause, when they're right after they float, but a softer way of just inviting them into a bigger conversation that isn't just about floating, that's about water. And maybe they may be more open to become water advocates in some way, shape, or form, whether it's, focused on helping people who need clean water in their community, or fixing what's broken in the lakes and the rivers around their town. I think that making that connection, and a number of float spas certainly do that. They connect the float experience to a broader wellness experience, to a broader sustainability movement, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah, definitely. Well, the last thing I'll mention on the float thing, and we'll move on back to the ocean, is I got in and I had just like all the tension in my shoulders and my neck and that upper part of my back. I was like, oh my gosh. I don't know, like, I didn't know I was carrying all that. But being in the water that way, where everything else, there was no weight on anything else, I guess I just realized it and felt it. It just jumped out right away, and then that melted away. Like the experience, just like the last 3/4 of it, that tension it left. it was gone. So that was really cool. I appreciated that.
There are all these. So I want to mention one area. So one funny little thing, and then one more serious thing. One is I've floated one time, and I literally felt like my right arm was where my left arm used to be, and my left arm was where my right, because like they literally passed through my body like that, and that they were on the wrong sides. And I was so confused. I was like, how the heck did my arm switch? I gotta get them back. That's what it felt like. And then I realized, okay, I'm just having a weird moment here. They're fine. But a recent study that just came out shows that floating is one of the best therapies for anxiety disorders, such as a range of eating disorders and body dysmorphia. And that is an assortment of diseases that affect an awful lot of people, and are very, very dangerous and very serious. And we've had our experiences in our family. It's touched anxiety disorders touch a lot of people, and it's nice to know that the water-based therapies can be at least one of the things that can help people have a better relationship with their body. And Jaimal alluded to that earlier, and that it's just so important. And something happens while you're floating that people who have used floating to help recover from anorexia and bulimia and body dysmorphia say that it's great. And so again, it's research by Justin Feinstein, if anybody's listening that could benefit from floating or know somebody, check it out.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things you said there really are good segues to kind of what I wanted to chat about was, the idea of water as literally as medicine for a lot of different things. That's one of the reasons that I love surfing so much. I have some anxiety issues, and it literally is the best thing for me. Being in the ocean, like, takes that stuff away. And for 24 to 48 hours after a good surf session, I just feel so much better. Literally, in every way. But I also have these interesting experiences, and this Jaimal Yogis guy is always in my head when I'm out there in the ocean and I'm getting mad because I'm not catching waves, or I'm surfing like a kook again. And like yesterday morning, I'm out there. It's not great. I'm on my longboard. I'm missing everything. I'm surfing terrible, and I'm just getting so upset. And then last time we spoke, Jamal's like, sometimes you just think about just catch one wave, or just look at the sun on the water, or just look at the waves, the water move, and let that reset your mind. And so I'm always trying to do those things. But it's so interesting. I had that experience yesterday. And then today, like I said, I went out this morning and even had my shortboard, smaller waves, surfed great. And then like the euphoria after that for hours. And even now, I don't know. It's just amazing and crazy. And, it's surfing is literally, the best medicine. There's a lot of great ways in the water that help. Going for a swim, just floating along in the ocean, or whatever it is. But you guys have talked about it. I'd love to hear a little more about whatever that is with the motion and the wave and the push and the rhythm that just has some unparalleled effect. Explain this to me. I need to understand.
Well, I agree. I concur. Yeah, I've thought a lot about this from just an unscientific place. Of you're getting this sweet cocktail of effects in surfing, because you get I know this from Jay's book, that the moment you even touch the water, your nervous system starts to get a little parasympathetic hit, like the healing begins, and you're getting that in the ocean as you drift out there and as you float. But then you're also into this adrenaline state of, this is exciting to get a ride, and then you're also getting exercise, which we know is has incredible advantages for just staying healthy, getting endorphins, we know from research on flow states, like when Steph's hitting every three, he can access that. He's just and he's gotten good at accessing it, at locking in, and getting to that place for athletes often means it's different than the float state, blue mind, where you're completely relaxed. You want a little bit of adrenaline, or like a little to access, because that's extra energy to your limbs, right? The fear system, or the amygdala, it's sending out the adrenaline to your limbs because it's saying, you need this energy now. There's something a little bit dangerous or a little bit exciting here. But you don't want to get into red mind where you have so much energy. You might get a boost in strength, but it's not comfortable and it's usually imprecise. So I think with surfing, when you have that euphoria, you're getting a little adrenaline, but you're also integrating it with your breath, with this experience of awe in the ocean, and there's just some special thing that happens where I think it's a unique cocktail that we go search for again and again. But as you were saying, you can have a bad day surfing and you can take it all for granted or get angry out there. And I think it's important to remember that you don't need all those things to get to that state. But I think it is an entry point, and surfing there's a reason it's so fun and people build a lifestyle around it. But I'd be curious to know from Jay, like, if there's any more science on what that is that surfers are experiencing.
Yeah, I think since we last spoke, and certainly in the last decade, the sort of clinical research on surf therapy programs has exploded, and the number of just stunningly beautiful programs and people devoting themselves to this thing called surf therapy is just expanding and refining itself and iterating, and people are sharing what works. So one of the insights I had recently, it was during the pandemic, and I was doing these Zoom calls with veterans groups who were doing surf therapy. And what one of the guys told me was that they're trained to live in red mind and then move back and forth between, Jaimal mentioned red mind, which is that very useful, very powerful, somewhat stressed, anxious, stimulated information gathering. It's our new normal. It's really useful in sort of performance and achievement context. But this man was telling me that they're trained to live in red mind and toggle back and forth between red mind and gray mind being burnout, which is not very useful. And then when to get out of gray mind as soon as they can, they go back to that like hyper on state and maybe add some caffeine to get themselves out of the gray mind, out of the burnout and the breakdown. And they toggle back and forth between those two modes until the burnout and the breakdown is so bad that they need medical help. And that's usually where they end up being sent sometimes to surf therapy. And what was explained to me is that they need to learn how Jaimal described it so beautifully, to move between blue and red mind. And this is an oversimplification of some pretty complex neurological activity, but it helps. These color codings help people remember it, and if they can remember it, they can apply it. If they can apply it, it's good for us. So you don't just, you're not just out there on a board floating like a float spot. You're doing stuff. You're responding. You're responding to wildlife. You're responding to the weather. You're responding to other surfers. The ocean's conditions, the size of the waves. You're making split-second decisions that could lead to pure joy or total crash. So that movement between red and blue mind I think is really the epitome of what makes surfing so satisfying, because we evolved to solve problems, to run away from danger, to fight when necessary, and we're good at it, and we have this apparatus that lets us do it, and we shouldn't just pretend it's not there and it's not useful. So activities like surfing, rock climbing, involve these moments of awe and wonder and bliss and relaxation, which is necessary to make the whole thing therapeutic, but punctuated by these extremes, but not dominated. So if it was just pure adrenaline, you're going to run out. You're going to break down. Then you're in burnout. But if you've got these, this like blissful floating, waiting, maybe chatting with a friend, and then there's punctuated moments of pure joy. You catch a wave and you handle it, and then you paddle back out, and you got a big smile on your face, or you paddle in and you got a bigger smile on your face at the end of the day. And so that's part of what's going on, is that toggling between the red and the blue mind. It's exercise. You've got oftentimes, the blue space, as it's referred to, is just incredibly enjoyable. And then Travis, you mentioned the sound, the entrainment that happens with the rhythm of the ocean. You kind of get into its rhythm, and it's a good one. It's a good rhythm to be in. And some of the research, with Blue Mind, we connect a lot of dots. So there's research on people drumming, synchronous drumming. Even thinking about rocking, when you rock a baby, helps them sleep. So there's this calming aspect to the ocean's rhythm, the sound of it, but also the movement of it. And then there's a visual rhythm. So you combine all of that. We yank it all apart into its little components to try to understand it with science. And then, but to really understand it, you need to put it all back together again and do it. And that it is complex, but it's super cool. And I think it's even more, when you get down into the science, it makes the experience more interesting, not less interesting. And the more we understand about it, maybe the more we'll practice. And it'll, for some people are like, I don't need to know the science. I'm good. I'm not one of those people. I like to dig into all of it and learn. So,
yeah. Well,
you make it accessible to us, which is so nice too. It's not like reading Blue Mind is not like reading a scientific study, much as I appreciate people who do them well.
Yeah.
One thing, Travis, if I could just riff on that one more time, is I remember, Jay, you talking about this. I think about this all the time when I'm surfing, as another element of the cocktail, is the appearance of water is complex. It's a pattern that we don't see. It's not replicated anywhere else. And so we often think of cityscapes as our complex, kind of crazy place where your brain's getting lots of stimulus. But yeah, I remember you talking about how the patterns in water are actually stimulating your brain in a complex way, but it's not in the same like language center kind of way, or that our usual neural pathways are sort of engaged in. It's in one that engages different parts of the brain that are relaxing, that it help us be in that awe and that presence. And it's something counterintuitive that I often think about when I'm when I'm trying that trick, Travis, of looking at the light on the water, instead of getting angry about the guy who just who's grabbed in the lineup.
Yeah, that's
that concept psychologists refer to as soft fascination, among other names. But it's you are either one of these people, or people who can sit for a week and look at the water and not get bored for a second, and they're just happy because it's changing. There's novelty, but it's like you said, it's not giving you problems to solve or information or language to decipher. The water's not asking you a question. It's it's holding you there in that place, but you're not getting really bored by it. It's not like staring at a blue wall, which could get boring really fast. And so that soft fascination is part of the key to it.
That calling it a special cocktail and then explaining all these other pieces that come together that make it so unique is I often think, like, when I hear people use the word, that they're stoked, I feel very territorial about that word. I feel like that only can be about surfing. You can't just be stoked because you got an A on your test. Like that word, I feel very possessive of that word, and that is referring to that unique thing that you get from surfing. That's probably just me, but anyway, I feel like the whole surfing experience, like, unless you've had that feeling afterwards, you don't really know what that word means.
That's right. Can't use Blue Mind at the roller skating rink.
Come on. Yeah, come on.
Hey, if it's a really wet roller skating rink, maybe we're onto something there. Underwater roller skating.
Oh man, here we go. New sports. I just wanted to ask you guys about two things randomly, one for each of you here. Jay, you went recently to Niagara Falls. Was that your first time there, or whether it was or not? What was it? What's it like? I've never been there. What was that like for you as a water experience?
It was my second time visiting Niagara Falls, and last time was quite a while ago. And I'd forgotten how incredible it really is, standing right there at the edge of that amazing quantity of water going over a cliff. And I understand all of the lore and all of the draw. And this time I was asked to do a live interview with the Weather Channel about Blue Mind, and did it from the edge of Niagara Falls, which kind of made for a pretty cool backdrop. But I'm very ecumenical about water. At least I try to be. I have my own preferences, but I really I want the conversation about Blue Mind to never feel exclusive or anything but accessible to everyone. And that really is the goal, is for Blue Mind to be common knowledge for 8 billion of us, to understand what this concept means, be able to practice it and have access to it. Conversations about comparing, Niagara Falls to the North Pacific, or, Mississippi River, or some other great body of water. I'm a yes and guy. Officially, I have my personal preferences, but it sort of gets like, it's almost like politics. You get lake people, river people, ocean people, float spa people, and it gets personal and political a little, but I like it all. I like it all. Yeah.
Yeah. I like it all for sure, but I'm like Jaimal. I like my water with a heavy dose of salt mixed in there. Jaimal, I was going to ask you about, I know you're doing a lot of different different work these days, and some fun kind of, fiction stuff. And I want to ask about, I think you mentioned water dragons. What's going on?
Yeah, and just to make a note on the tribe, the water tribes, one of the most die-hard surfers, I've written about him in the Fear Project, Doc Renneker, one of my neighbors, big wave maverick surfer and doctor, who I recently saw him after a kayaking adventure, and he goes, I don't know, that might have been the most fun I've had in the water. And that was after, a lifetime. He's like 65. He's dedicated his whole life to surf exploration. And so, the tribes can come together. And yeah. So, but yeah, water dragons. I mean, I stumbled on, there's some really cool mythology in all cultures around water, about water being alive and embodied. And in the East, water dragon, water was often seen as in a dragon form. So, the rivers, the weather were sort of controlled influenced by dragons. And I think, if you look at the clouds, that ethereal water form, you often see things that look, I think, a lot like a dragon. I mean, you can see anything in the clouds, but there is something like that mist coming over the mountains that you can see how the storytelling developed. But I just became enchanted by this idea of a water dragon. And so, and I also am a big fantasy fan. And so my next book, the first one in the series, is it's about some kids who at a school in Hong Kong, at an international school, and one of them finds a water dragon egg, and they have to figure out, it hatches in the bathtub, of course. And then, but anyway, it's just been a lot of fun. I think having kids opens me up to that children's literature and how fun it is. And I think that beginner's mind, and I think that's actually a great way to re-experience different aspects of the water. Like, I get so locked in surfing, but they're so stoked on the pool and on the rivers. And so in a similar way, this adventure with water dragons has been like, getting to get excited about books in a whole different way for me. So yeah, hopefully you water fans will go on the water dragon journey with me. The first book's out in September from Scholastic. City of Dragons is the name.
Awesome. Very, very cool. Well, I know last time we spoke, Jaimal, I talked about MOP. MOP rides the waves of life, and just that being a real great way to help kids learn about managing emotions a bit. And I constantly talk to my youngest about, remember, these are just the bad waves. Just duck dive these bad waves right now. Wait for the good ones. That's constantly a little thing I whisper to him. And yeah, both you guys haunt me in a good way all the time because I'm so focused on water. Yeah, woo, in a spiritual way. It's not just like my professional career; it's my life. And you guys have talked about it and framed it, and always have lessons that are echoing around in my head. So thank you both. Appreciate the conversation for the 100th episode. I encourage everybody to go look you guys up. Great stuff to read, great stuff to learn about. Yeah, and hopefully the next time this conversation can be in person. I think that'd be a good goal. I'll come out to the West Coast. So
Niagara Falls, maybe. I have never been. So
yeah, we have a tour guide. All right, guys.
I recommend it.
Hey, guys, thank you so much.
Thank you, Travis. Thanks, Jay. Great to see you guys.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Always fun to talk to you. All right. Look forward to the next one.
Waterloop.
Thanks, everyone, for listening to today's episode. A special thanks to Waterloop supporters, Spring Point Partners, and the Walton Family Foundation. The Waterloop podcast is sponsored by High Sierra Showerheads, the smart, stylish way to save energy, water, and money while enjoying a powerful shower. Use promo code LOOP20 for 20% off at highsierrashowerheads.com. If you like Waterloop, please subscribe to the YouTube channel or your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on social media and visit waterloop.org to sign up for updates.
Waterloop, Waterloop, Waterloop.